All right, group 2, you can go when you're ready.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Today my team, Libby, Tina, Kasner, Joshua, and I are going to be discussing COVID-19 and the challenges the supply chain must face in order to vaccinate 7.9 billion people. We will be taking a look about the US and global responses, as well as the business, consumer, and government impacts. So as we know, COVID-19 is not the world's first pandemic, and it will likely not be the last. But what are we doing now to put an end to it? So currently, COVID-19 vaccines are being developed at a breakneck pace with more than 250 potential vaccines that are in various stages of development around the world. With progress being made at such a fast speed, we could see some vaccines ready by the end of this year. However, a broken supply chain could derail this momentum, which would ultimately stunt the economic recovery and likely increase the numbers of lives lost. So we need to make sure that the medical supply chains are in place and ready to go. So now the problem at hand is ultimately how we're going to get 7.9 billion vaccines to everyone around the world. And to be successful with this, there are some major factors that need to be considered. So first, a potential lack of data could mean more stringent temperature requirements for the vaccine supply chain, with some vaccines needing to be kept at temperatures as low as negative 80 degrees Celsius. This poses challenges for the existing medical supply chain that conventionally distributes vaccines at 2 to 8 degrees Celsius. And due to the vaccine's urgency, the actual transportation of these vaccines will pose a huge challenge. If we want to achieve global coverage over the next 2 years, this means that 15,000 flights and 15 million cooling boxes could be needed to transport the billions of doses of vaccines around the world. Additionally, technology will play a vital role in ensuring the smooth execution along every step of the supply chain. We will also need to increase the overall visibility on relevant data for everyone involved. This is not only essential to properly judge supply and demand, but also to identify any potential bottlenecks that may slow the transport and distribution of the vaccines. Ultimately, geography will be a defining factor in how quickly and efficiently vaccines can be distributed, and here temperature requirements are likely to be the main challenge. Vaccines that need to be distributed in regions with a particularly warm climate, such as large parts of Africa, South America, and Asia, will pose a huge challenge. So in other words, if the vaccine needs such extreme care, we are currently only able to easily reach 2.5 billion of the world's population.
So in terms of a global response, there's some good news and there's some bad news. Freighter and freighter-like air transport capacity has gone through the roof, and this is partially due to the fact that the airline industry has seen a sharp decrease in demand, which leaves a large surplus of planes. Now, according to the Wall Street Journal, we're going to need less than 1,000 747s to get these vaccines to everybody. And that's the equivalent of about 1% of the global yearly supply chain capacity. However, strict temperature controls are needed. Now, on the other side of that coin, Bloomberg thinks that we're going to need about 8,000 777 cargo planes to treat half the world's population. And there's also concern over sourcing the materials responsibly and reliably. Finally, there's Project Optimize, which is a collaboration between the World Health Organization and Project Path. And their goal over the past 5 years has been optimizing the pharmaceutical supply chain around the world to ensure that people are getting their medicine as quickly and efficiently as possible.
So now we're going to take a look at the US response individually. So announced on May 15th, President Donald Trump launched Operation Warp Speed in an attempt to bring vaccinations, therapeutics, and diagnostics to the American people in record time. The goal of this operation is to produce and deliver 300 million doses of safe and effective vaccines, with the initial doses available by January of 2021. Though the coronavirus is highly efficient in spreading from human to human, the majority of people who get infected do recover, which gives promise that a vaccine is possible. So you might be wondering, how is this operation being funded? Well, Congress has already directed almost $10 billion to this effort through supplemental funding. The concept of this operation is to take processes in the development of a vaccine that would normally take years and compress them into months. So from a supply chain perspective and relaying it back to what we've learned in class, they're running these processes in parallel rather than sequential. So as for the progress, last week, Pfizer, one of the world's largest pharmaceutical companies, announced that an early analysis of its coronavirus vaccine trial showed promising results. The analysis found that the vaccine was more than 90% effective in preventing the disease among trial volunteers who had no evidence of prior infection. So Pfizer plans to ask the FDA for emergency authorization of this two-dose vaccine later this month. Though this was a positive step, there are still many questions that need to be asked about the efficacy of this vaccine. But still, this is good news, and those working on this operation hope that this makes us realize we're not stuck in this situation forever and that there's hope coming, whether it's this vaccine or another.
For businesses, the supply chain not only involves manufacturing the vaccine, but also storage and packing components, cold transit for the vaccine, global shipping, distribution strategies, and storage. Vaccines are a heavily regulated product, which places limits on what manufacturers can do and what components they can use. For instance, glass and stoppers are typically approved by the FDA, and right now, there is a shortage of the sand used to make the glass vials for vaccine storage. As for the needles and syringes, there is not enough capacity in the global industry to manufacture the hundreds of millions or billions needed in a month or two, according to the largest US-based needle and syringe manufacturer, Becton, Dixon and Company. There are currently 5 billion vaccine doses manufactured annually, and with another 6 or 7 billion projected COVID-19 vaccines needed, there is an obvious prediction for a shortage of vaccines. The key to solving this potential problem is global cooperation. The chief executive of the second largest global logistics provider, Kane and Nagel, says the task is not impossible, but partners have to collaborate, otherwise there will be a shortage. These collaborations have already begun, and especially in the distribution sector. UPS announced its partnership with vaccine manufacturers to transport the ingredients for the clinical trials and for when the vaccine is ready to be commercially distributed via cold chain. They are working with the aviation industry to find the smartest way to move products. What impacts the supply chain for businesses the most in the COVID vaccine situation is the demand. The partnerships set up now are predicting they can handle it, but one wrong move and there will be a possible shortage. As for the impact the vaccine has on the consumers cannot expect COVID-19 vaccines to be available to everyone at once. The suppliers need time to prepare for the ramp up of production once the vaccine is ready to be commercially sold. According to Dr. Fauci, the first consumers that will receive the vaccine are frontline workers. Once the supply chain develops, we will see an increase in the amount of vaccines delivered to the general population. Relating this to what we learned in class, it is important that there is a model of customer satisfaction being followed between the companies making the vaccine and the consumers of the vaccine. If there is not clear communication of the complexity of the supply chain, it will lead to knowledge and communication gaps. It is important for consumers to be aware and be patient.
Next, we're going to talk how this impacts the government. The United States government said they're going to expense all initial vaccines, and the process is going to be run by the Center of Disease Control Center. The United States government has also said they're going to provide COVID-19 a vaccination chart because a lot of the vaccines that are in trial right now have multiple doses. Medical offices, hospitals, and pharmacies all need to be approved with the CDC in order to give a vaccine. In order to do this, they need to have sterilized equipment, personnel protective equipment, and make sure they're able to deliver an immense amount of vaccines. The government has also said they're going to prioritize locations. So hospitals in big areas are going to be first given approval because they can reach the masses.
So looking towards the future, there are some successes and there are some challenges. Right now, temperature-controlled transportation is proven to be a very big obstacle. There's a few different solutions in development, including dry ice and specialized refrigerators. Also, sourcing the materials responsibly has proven to be a challenge as well. Finding reliable sources to make 7 billion vaccines has proven to be quite a challenge. Finally, then that ties into developing the appropriate vaccine quantity. Making 1 billion of anything is a challenge, and vaccines are no exception. There are also some successes though. Air freight capabilities are skyrocketing. Vaccines should be finished by 2021, and vaccine storage solutions are currently in development and looking promising. Thank you very much for your time, and we'd like to open up the floor for questions.
Okay, gang, this is your time.
I have a question. I'd just be interested to kind of hear y'all's thoughts on the Moderna vaccine that came out yesterday at 94.5% efficacy and kind of how you think it's going to impact this now that there's multiple vaccines that have been proven to be beneficial in helping stop the coronavirus.
So I think it's interesting. One, I think it was Pfizer who has a vaccine that only needs to be stored at -20 Celsius, but the Moderna one actually has to be much colder. And so I think what's going to be the sort of determining factor with these vaccines is how delicate we need to be when we're transporting them.
Don't be shy. Keep the participation up here, please.
So I don't know if I missed it or if you mentioned it. I know that the U.S. has the Operation Warp Speed initiative. Is there a sort of a global initiative from the UN to get people vaccinated?
Kind of. So the World Health Organization is sort of mainlining the global initiative. I know that Berlin and some city in France, I can't remember the name, those are going to be the two main locations for the European portion of the vaccine delivery system, and that's where they're going to be stored and then shipped out from as well. So kind of, but I think a lot of countries are sort of, the EU is doing their own thing, the US is doing their own thing, and so on and so forth.
Josh, your dog asleep on the bed behind you was great. He was on his back while you were presenting. It was really good. And
Yeah, he's a good dog.
so the one question I have for the group is, what was maybe the most surprising or single most surprising thing you found kind of researching this topic?
I think for me personally was kind of the conditions the vaccines have to be kept under with such low temperatures. Like I know normal vaccines have to be temperature regulated, but I didn't realize that. I just thought that was for every vaccine. I didn't think that there would be vaccines that would require that. So that's kind of what is making part of this so challenging to like reach to the more rural areas and like areas that we don't have easier access to.
I would say personally, I think researching kind of what the US is doing specifically and kind of figuring out that there are still like so many questions that have to be asked. And I was just really intrigued with how quickly things are coming into play that would normally have taken years. And like I thought like there was a section where talking about how Pfizer with their last week, they came out with the 90% efficacy, but they don't know out of those people which are like critically conditioned, so which is a really important thing that needs to be answered since they're going to be among the first people to get vaccinated. So I just really thought that was interesting.
All right. Well done, group. Thank you. Give them a hand, everybody.